Hi, I'm Len Epp from LeanPub, and in this Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Jimmy Janlén. Based in Stockholm, Jimmy is an Agile coach and self-described bureaucracy therapist, cultural acupuncturist, and visualization magician who helps teams and leaders in their adoption of Agile practice and culture. You can follow him on Twitter at Jimmy Janlén, which I'll spell out, JIMMYJANLEN, and check out his website at visualizationexamples.com. He does videos on the YouTube channel, Crisp Agile Academy, and you can read his blog at blog.crisp.se/author/Jimmy Janlén. He's the author of a number of LeanPub books, including Decision-Making Principles and Practices, Jimmy Cards, and his best-selling book, Toolbox for the Agile Coach, Visualization Examples, How Great Teams Visualize Their Work. In this interview, we're going to talk about his background and career, professional interests, a little bit about his time working for Spotify, or times working for Spotify, and all his work on visualization, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about his work as a self-published author. So thank you very much for being on the Front Matter podcast.
Thank you so much. I lost my word for this great introduction. Thank you.
I always like to start these interviews by asking people for their origin story. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where you grew up and how you first became interested in computer science and software.
Grew up in the middle of Sweden, in a small town named Kumla. And then at some point early on, I decided I want to be part of creating the amazing graphical effects for the future Star Wars movies. So I decided that's going to be digital, and hence I need to study computer science. However, I forgot about that dream somewhere along the journey. So I ended up as a consultant, IT consultant, .NET, Microsoft. So I was a developer for 8 years, I think, until I stumbled upon Scrum for the first time. And that was in 2006, maybe.
And how did you come across Scrum?
I started working with Siemens. They do all things, tumblers, wind, electricity and gadgets, whatever, whatnot. And then they also developed software. And at that point in time, they were building this huge administrative tool system monster for hospitals. And when I joined, they have just gone through a dramatical, top-down, big bang, hardcore transformation to Agile, 2005. So they said, we're doing Scrum here. I said, whatever, don't talk process with me. I'm a developer. Just let me code. Processes has never helped me so far. But then I realized something else was going on. This was actually an environment that's setting a process, a way of working that helped me. So then I started to pay attention, and then I started to read up on it. And that wasn't that much to read back then. But then I got blown away and realized the power of it. And a few years down the road, I had the opportunity to become a Scrum Master, and then I changed assignment as a consultant. I've always been a consultant all my life. And for the past 10-ish years, I've been primarily doing Agile coaching.
And for those who might be unfamiliar with some of these terms, one way I always like to frame these kinds of discussions is software is the foundation on which basically everything in the world is built and done nowadays.
Yes.
And so the way that software is built is actually this, it's something that I think, sort of as it were, people outside the profession are sort of indifferent to, but actually, if you're wondering why you run into security bugs here or privacy problems there, a lot of it has to do with the way software is built. And we're sort of, if you think in grand historical terms, still at the very beginning of figuring out how we're going to be doing this. And so just in that context, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. Let's talk first about what Scrum is.
Scrum is a simple recipe for how to collaborate in teams, 5 to 10 people. So it's a set of simple ceremonies, routines, habits you can have as a team in order to collaborate, think together, plan together, execute together, and deliver together. But the basis of Scrum is Agile, and for me, Agile is more of a mindset. It's a way of viewing work. There's many different ways to approach work, and Agile. If you're doing Agile, you subscribe to the belief that work is best done if we do it in teams. We put ownership of the work and the result to the team, and we give them the biggest possible room to own and make decisions for themselves. So they, as a team, and that's a belief, and it's still, according to some people at least, an unproven hypothesis, even though Agile is taking the world by storm. So if Scrum is a simple framework for a software development team to do Agile, for me, Agile is bigger. Agile is in some sense a cultural revolution in the workspace, because it flips upside down management, leadership, teamwork, how we conduct and execute on work, and how we learn how to improve. Yeah, and it's rapidly expanding beyond IT and software as well.
Yeah, you've got I'll link to, I mean, everything I refer to in this video, I'll try to link to in the transcription. But you've got a great video on YouTube where you actually have all sorts of great visualizations of like pyramids and things like that, and a great explanation of kind of, it's a bit sort of literally cartoonish, but a kind of old school way of doing things where the kind of workers are at the bottom of the pyramid and they exist to serve the masters at the top. But this Agile revolution, one way of characterizing it is that the leaders should view themselves as servants of the people who are actually creating the stuff.
Yes.
So the authority kind of still, the final authority still kind of is claimed by the CEO at the end of the day, and the board and the C-suite generally. But there's this view that instead of seeing, I've got this image that I've used on this podcast before of like, you can imagine an old like kind of, just maybe from science fiction or whatever, or fantasy, but like an old salt mine in ancient Rome, where there's guys with whips at the bottom of the pit, and then there's guys with whips for the guys with whips further up the pit. And then, at the very top is some guy in, I don't know, like a toga, who's kind of in charge of it all. And the idea was that, I sort of use this image deliberately because the idea is that a worker is someone who represents a problem that needs to be, you need to prevent them from escaping. You need to punish them in order to get them to work.
Yeah. And they are a machine that you need to keep on motivating.
Exactly. And negatively. And Agile represents this way of saying, no. Like, work should be a place that as a leader of a business, you should make your business a place where people want to be.
Yes.
And you should give them autonomy. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit. So one thing, I guess I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself here, so I'll pause on this for a moment. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because it comes up on this podcast a lot, is if you were starting out now in a career with the intention of, maybe spending some time as a developer and then being a consultant, would you do a full computer science degree at university?
I think so. I'm not sure. I started developing myself. I started writing code. I wrote when I was 10. When I was 11, I wrote my first text-based RPG adventure. By the age of 12, I wrote my first text-based RPG adventure editor. So I believe I was a really, really good developer even before I started computer science at university. But I did learn all the math and all the foundation of it. So for me, it was worth it. But then again, I've got through my career as a consultant, because I have the luxury of meeting so many people from all the places I visit and the companies I work with. And I met so many brilliant people without a formal university degree. So, I loved it myself, and I learned a lot, and I believe it helped me. But then again, I've been proving wrong. I've seen the opposite as well. Really brilliant developers who become technical leaders within their company and even beyond without it. So, no. That was a fluffy answer.
No, I thought that was a great answer. I particularly like that you sort of rooted it in your own experience. That happens a fair amount when I'm talking to people that they talk about their first experience coding. And just for the record, if you could you let us know what your first computer was? Because the answer, the answers to that question have ranged from Jerry Weinberg saying I was the first computer I had to a guy using a calculator.
It was a Commodore 60. No, actually, you're right. It was the first thing I actually wrote some code on. No, it was a Commodore 64.
Okay.
And I started out with just copying programs. And by the end of a 4-hour-long session, when I kind of just copied the text from a magazine, and once I finally hashed out all the commas and numbers that was wrong, I was rewarded with a balloon that bounced around. And in the beginning, I actually thought that the text I copied was like a wizard's spell. The balloon was always in the laptop or in the computer, it resided in Commodore 64 or Mickey the Mouse or whatever, or the rocket. I just casted a spell to conjure that animation. But after a while, I figured out, no, actually, the thing I'm copying here is actually code that creates the balloon or whatever. But
yeah, that's really interesting. It's curious. One of the reasons I asked the question about getting a computer science degree is so many of the people that I interview had that experience of learning the way you did. So from a magazine or something like that, and literally for those listening who might not know, like a print magazine is
exactly
what we're talking about. Like you'd have to get your parents to take you to a store maybe, and then you'd browse a stand and buy something that had a program typed out in it in print in ink. And then you would reproduce it on your computer at home. But of course, nowadays, you can get all kinds of materials. I mean, there's all kinds of books, of course, on LeanPub, but there's all kinds of videos. Yeah. And even one-on-one interactions and, Stack Overflow and just the resources available are just incredible. And of course, not just the resources for sort of doing it, like for learning, but for like the computers that we have now are also just incredible. And it does make it a genuine conundrum. If you're starting out a career in this area, what should you do?
I guess you've been part of founding a startup, right? So follow your passion. That's my advice. Even if you do study or find a really passionate project to work on, because when you're passionate, that's when you pour energy into something, and when you pour energy and time into something, that's when you become great.
And just before we get back to talking about Agile, and I'd like to talk to you about your time. I think you've done a couple of stints at Spotify.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm just looking at LinkedIn here. Did you also spend some time in New Zealand?
Yes, I did. I spent 6 months. It was kind of an MVP. Me and my ex-girlfriend, wife, were trying to figure out if we actually wanted to move to New Zealand. So we decided, let's try for 6 months. So yeah, I loved it. It's the single most beautiful country in the world. However, it's so freaking far away and isolated, but it was beautiful. And there I worked with a huge, ambitious, large-scale Agile transformation of one of the banks of New Zealand in Auckland. So that was really exciting.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to ask you about that. So one of the challenges. So we've already talked a little bit about Agile, and one of the things that happens if you're a consultant in this world is Agile transformation, which is there's a company that decides it wants to move from the sort of, let's just say, the old top-down model to a little bit more of a bottom-up model, and that's a very challenging thing.
Yes, yes, it is. I used to be super cynical about the success rate of an Agile transformation, especially if you're a huge company. I don't know, 5,000, 10,000, 20, 50,000 employees. But then again, there's more and more success stories to be found around the world, but it's so super hard. If you have a company that's been around for 50 or 100 years, especially if you're a bank or a similar business, and you're trying to transform from this hierarchical, bureaucratical environment, a way of working, which is slow, but it is very safe. And if you're a bank, slow is good. Slow is safe. And if you've been around for too long as a company, all the structures, they get embedded in the walls, in the people. It becomes an entity of itself. So it takes an enormous amount of perseverance and commitment from all layers, especially the top, of course, to do this. And you need to, I think, for it to be successful, you can't review it like just another process framework you put on top of everything else. I've heard so many scary stories about that. They have their own way of working, and then they discovered ITIL and PM3 and whatnot, and then they discover safe, and they just stack it all on top of each other. If you're doing that, you're nothing going to change. So I think, but if you want true change, you need to tackle it on every level, both organization, leadership, culture, behaviors, habits, and yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One thing you've spoken about is how sometimes, a new structure, which is basically people, can be created within a company in order to solve a problem. And then when that problem is solved, the structure remains behind.
Yes. I've seen that so many times.
And so I'm very curious about that. So, do people who are in positions like that know it?
They know their value is derived from the work they do, right? So let's pretend that we invented a bureaucratic process to ensure ourselves of this or that clumsiness, right? And because that was a huge problem, and then we needed maybe to hire someone, and we gave that person a title, and the company grew, and that person became a department. So now we have institutionalized.
Yeah.
How do you say it?
Institutionalized, yeah.
Institutionalized the solution into hierarchies with roles and so on. And then, let's imagine me. I'm a head of or a middle manager in that hierarchy. Obviously, I want to still have a job tomorrow. So I'm going to be opposed to any change that tries to get rid of the structure I'm living in. I want to be valuable. I want to, as a human person, I want to feel safe and I want to be appreciated. So hence, I'm going to protect the structure, whatever it is. So in that sense, the structure gets a life of its own.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One thing that can be very important as well is how things can be kind of budget driven. And so I've got this story I like to tell. It's kind of a sad story about a friend of mine whose career wasn't going so well, and he took a job as a product manager for a big IT project that was government funded at one of these companies, where they have these giant sad buildings in nondescript company names, and he realized very quickly that there was nothing for him to do, and the reason he'd been hired was there was a budget which had a position for a product manager, and the sort of person who was at the top of this budget wasn't going to give up a part of their budget, and the person who made the plan wasn't going to admit they made a mistake and they didn't need this person they budgeted for, and so they filled the spot with my friend.
I think that's another example of how these structures becomes a thing of their own. I guess somewhere along the line, they decided that, damn it, we're too big. We need to be in control of our money. And now we're going to split our money, or the money we're going to spend this year, by department or by manager. And so, hello, manager, here's your budget for the year. Here's your pile of money. And by the way, if you don't spend it, you're going to get less money next year. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter what they spend it on, because their influence and power, in some sense, is directly linked to their budget. So they need to spend it, or they need to sell ideas that are worth bigger budgets for next year. So nothing in this is aimed at employee happiness, satisfaction, customer happiness, or anything like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One, this will sound maybe kind of silly, but I remember there's a company here in Canada called WestJet, and they were kind of well known. One of the things they became well known for was they empowered their workers in airports. So the person who, in the old days, would print out your ticket for you and stuff and check you in. Those people had the power to do things like order pizza for customers if there was a flight delay. And this might sound silly, but it was revolutionary, particularly both from the perspective of the customer and from the perspective of the worker. The idea that this guy could just choose to do something kind of risky and that costs money on the fly to help people make money, and everybody loved it because it was empowering the people at the point of contact with customers to make decisions.
And it sends another very strong message. Hello, you are employed and I trust you. I trust that you want to do a good job, and I trust that you make responsible decisions. So if I have that freedom, I'm also feeling trusted to act responsible and trusted that I'm doing my best to do a good job. So there's some huge benefits of that approach. And I know you wanted to ask me a little bit about Spotify later on, or
Yeah,
I have
sure. Yeah.
I have so many examples. I spent together 4 years all in all in two different periods with a 1.5 year gap in between at Spotify. And there's so many stories to tell that goes. There's no room in this podcast, but they really live by this. So they default to openness and transparency. That's one thing, and they also default to trusting employees, and they have so many active acts of trust. So, for example, default to open is one. They share every single information with everyone at the company. So they went public last year, right? That or was it earlier this year? No, it was last year.
It feels like it wasn't that long ago. Just for a little bit of context. So Spotify, for those who maybe don't know, is this very successful music streaming service, and it's based in Sweden, right?
Yes, founded and headquarters in Sweden.
Yeah, and it's this huge success story, and it sort of started very small, and is well known in the sort of software development world for something called the Spotify model that is, a beast of legend. And I mean, I know you'll get a chance to talk about this, that there isn't really a sort of like hard and fast model. What there is a bunch of principles. So anyway, with that context, you've had the fortune of being there a couple of times to see this huge company grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a luxury to be part of their journey. I wasn't there from the beginning when they were really small in one tiny office, but I think I joined when there were 300-400 people. And I ended my last engagement with them roughly a year ago. Then they were 4,000. So they've experienced hyper growth for 10 years in a row, more or less. 30-40% growth in number of employees each year, which is just...
That's crazy.
It's crazy, really crazy. But going back to the topic earlier about trust and transparency, So I think one reason they are successful with this is that they distribute ownership. They truly believe in autonomy, moving ownership and decision making to the teams that are working on the problem or working on the feature or working on the platform. That in itself is an act of trust, right? So the teams are hugely responsible for deciding what to do next and how to do it and so on, which opportunities to pursue. Every single person has access to, or used to at least, when I ended my engagement there, had access to production from day one. So if you wanted to, you could screw things up, and that happened. But when it happened, you got celebrated for having the courage to try something. And people helped out to fix it, and so they have all these great acts of trust. Another act of trust is that if you think you need to fly from Stockholm to New York to visit a team, you just book a ticket in their system. Because if you think you need to travel, we believe you. If you need a new keyboard, or you lost your cable or charger or whatever, each office has a desk, a self-service desk. So you just go there and grab it. But in order for you to make a responsible decision, the price tag is next to it. So if you're thinking, I need a new keyboard, I'm just going to take this one. And then you actually see the price tag, and then you might realize that, this was expensive. I'm going to have a second look before I take a new one. So there's so many examples of active act of trust, and that makes people motivated. They feel trusted. They feel appreciated. It's a super powerful thing.
And there's something they have called a failure wall. Is that right?
Yes. It's a simple flip chart or whiteboard titled failure wall, and it pops up here and there. It's not a process or enforced thing. It's just someone started doing it and it was fun, and then it spread. So it keeps popping up, and it lives for a few weeks or a few months, and then it kind of fades away, and then it pops up somewhere else. And the idea is simple. If you screw up, you accidentally send an email to everyone, or you screw something up in production, or whatever comes in as you do. As a leader, as a developer, as a tester, whatnot. Then you write your failure or your mistake on a Post-it. You explain it to the people that happens to be around, and you do a failure bow, and then you are received with an applaud. And the symbolism of this is very important, because it signals that making mistakes is okay as long as you act responsible on them and you learn from them and you try to improve on it.
Yeah, and it's very interesting the way this responsibility is kind of formalized, and when you're working at Spotify, you're part of a squad. That's kind of the lowest level of organization. Is that right?
That's right.
And can you explain a little bit about what a squad is?
It's a team. It's a Scrum. No, it's an Agile team. But they've decided to call it something special. So they decided to name it Squad. And it clarifies even further what the properties of that team. So it's 5 to 7, maybe 10 people, co-located. They sit together in one room. They have a clear mission. It could be develop Spotify for cars or speakers, or improve the search algorithm, or improve the way the login experience. They have a narrow mission. So a user-facing, if possible, a user-facing journey that they are responsible for improving over time. They are end-to-end, so they should be able to deliver. They should be able to think, plan, execute, build, and deliver themselves. And once they have delivered it to production, they are also responsible for maintaining it and fixing problems as they occur. So they don't hand over the feature to a maintenance team or anything. They are self-organizing, meaning that the people in the team, they are expected to figure out together how to collaborate, how to help out, who does what in which order, and so on.
And the squad sits together. They're co-located. Right?
Yes, that's a built-in design principle of their organization. So yes, the members of a squad, they have actually a big room together, whiteboard chairs, a lounge area, and so on, TV. Maybe a small booth where they can talk undisturbed on the phone or with a few people. Several squads are grouped into an organizational unit called a tribe. And once again, the tribe is co-located. So when possible, there are exceptions, of course, squads belonging to the same tribe, I guess, kind of department-ish thing, they are also co-located. So they sit together on the same floor in the same building.
And is there another level of organization that kind of cuts across? I'm forgetting the name. I think there's a name for it. But so you can have people in different squads who are all part of the same group as well.
Yes, I think I know what you're getting at here. So all work is done in squads, right? So we collaborate, we build. There's no work done anywhere outside the squad. However, the back-end developers, for example, in a tribe, or the QA or Java developers, they of course want to share knowledge between people of common interest or common skill base. So that's when they have a chapter. So I do my work in a squad. I sit together and work with my squad, but I belong to a chapter. So maybe I'm a back-end engineer, then I would belong to a back-end chapter. And that back-end chapter also has a chapter lead, which is my hiring manager. So that's how it plays out.
That's really interesting. And so Spotify has one of the reasons I gather it's sort of a joke to talk about the Spotify model is that they're changing all the time, and they've gone down different paths. And I'm forgetting, there was this one path they went down that you talk about in a video where they had like quarterly targets or something like that, and this failed dramatically as a model.
Yeah. First time they did it, they struggled with it for a few years, and then they gave up because the whole company went into kind of a death rattle with itself every end of quarter. But actually, they've since 2 or 3 years now, they're doing OKRs again. It's a new twist. If you read the book on how OKRs should be used, they're not doing that. So they're doing is kind of a simplified Spotify adopted version of it, and they call it OKRs. So when I start explaining how Spotify do OKRs to someone who is, I don't know, an OKR guru, they get very upset.
And this is objectives and key results, by the way.
Yes. So once every quarter, the squads and people within each tribe get together and through various collaborative workshops, they agree upon what ambition do we set for ourselves this quarter and what specific smart, measurable goals should we set for ourselves. That's the key results. And this has been working out really well for them, actually. So this is for the first time they've got an alignment process that works for them. But this isn't enough. They also have something they call Spotify Rhythm on top of this, which dictates what are the company's top 10 most important priorities right now. So all tribes need to align their work and ambitions towards those company bets.
That's a really interesting concept. So one thing that someone coming from a sort of more conventional management or working background might think is like all this empowering of people at the level of product creation sounds great, but can it potentially lead to chaos? And the answer is yes. But one of the ways and so you talk very, very clearly about how there's a cost. All of this great stuff doesn't come for free, and the price you pay is communication.
Yes.
And so having, say, 10 very clear goals that everybody knows is really important. And we'll get down to the level of visualization. And when I say down, I mean that's getting to where things really matter. But at the top, Spotify's CEO Daniel Ek, he talks directly to the whole company routinely.
Yes, that's another great thing they're doing, and I'm amazed that not just him, but the whole C-suite. So roughly every 6th week, so 2 or 3 times every quarter, they have all hands on town halls and big gatherings where every single employee is invited. So they have this. They talk on stage about the big news, about maybe a new company bet, or they celebrate the finished company bet, or they have a topic or the year in review or whatnot. But the most baffling thing about that event is that they use roughly the last 20 minutes. It varies, but usually 1 hour-ish. And then the last 20 minutes is a Q&A. Every single person in the whole company can submit a question in an app, and then everyone else can thumb vote on those questions. And when it's time for Q&A, they reply to as many questions as they can, starting from the ones with most likes. And so the 5, 7, 8-ish C-suite people on stage, they do their best to provide the best possible, most honest answer to each and every question. And this creates a fantastic direct dialogue with the C-suite and 5,000 employees.
And as I understand it as well, at least at one time, Daniel Ek was actually writing these long email replies to questions that were submitted through some kind of app as well.
Yeah, that's a slightly different story, but yes, any unreplied question they get on in the Q&A, they do reply to together, so the following week or something. Yes. Yeah. No. That's
so great to hear about that how it's not of course it's all coming from a place of goodwill, but how this sort of theoretical importance that this kind of communication has for efficient and productive management of a company. One thing I wanted to ask you about specifically, because you wrote a blog post about it recently, was the leadership health check. Which I believe came from the squad health check that you learned about at Spotify.
Yeah, so I was working in this tribe, in this department, and the leadership team, so in the tribe there were, the tribe of 60, there were maybe actually 15 or 20 people that had some kind of leadership or manager title. And we wanted to figure out how we can improve. And someone said, wait a second, we're having the squads do the squad health check once or twice a year, sometimes more often. Can't we do something similar? So, inspired by the squad health check, we developed a leadership health check. So it's a set of questions. Do you have fun at work? Are you having healthy conflicts? Is there a clear vision of where you're going? Do you feel that you are aligned? So there's all these aspects of collaborating as a leadership team. So we did that, and it was brilliant. And then later on, I developed this further, and then used this at the client I worked with after that, and to great success. So that's when I realized that this is too good. So this needs to be shared. So then I wrote a blog post about it. And I think that when I promoted it on LinkedIn, that became my single most shared LinkedIn article.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The idea is that you get, you get leadership together within a meeting, and you have someone is nominated the facilitator, and then you have these steps that you go through where you basically everybody gets a chance to report on how they feel, basically, and not just how they feel, but like how things are going.
Yeah. Now there's so many great, interesting discussion that comes from this. Well, one question is, for example, what's your stress level? Do you feel you have plenty of time? Do you have the energy to react to fires? Or do you feel like you're constantly firefighting, never had time to think ahead, and so on? And people obviously have different experiences, right? So some might vote green. Yeah, I'm good. Others might vote red. And that's when you have a really interesting discussions. Or even more interesting, do you feel that you have a clear vision that guides you in your prioritization? If someone votes green and another one votes red, well, you have something to talk about. So there's no right and wrong, but they're obviously perceiving reality differently. And if you want to work together as a team, as a tight leadership team, well, you need to sort those things out.
It's really interesting. You're reminding me of something. I forget which blog post or maybe it was even in one of your books, but there was this one sort of, I guess there was this maybe a set of squads that were doing health checks, and the resources that were devoted afterwards were focused on the team that reported the sort of most unhappiness and the team that reported the least unhappiness, because it was discovered that the team that recorded the least unhappiness was the most recently formed team.
Yeah.
And probably wasn't assessing itself correctly.
No, they were in the honeymoon phase where or people typically don't really speak their true mind, and it's a superficial harmony and happiness. So the important thing when you do these kinds of checks or surveys or evaluations is not just stare yourself blind at the colors or numbers. It's the actual discussions that they produce. That's where the value is. So I can even argue that it's not really worth the time to track progress over time because of factors like this. The true value comes from the discussions, from the insights, and the actions people want to carry out afterwards. So the agreements and the actions and the commitments that spur from these discussions. That's the true value.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not my field, but I'm a huge skeptic of people who. I'm a huge skeptic of placing too much objective kind of being projecting too much objective being onto data.
Yeah.
People often think that if they see numbers or if the words like data are used, then there's sort of, as it were, nothing to see here, folks. It's all straightforward and worked out. When actually, it can all be an illusion and not refer to reality at all. Just before we go on to your books, I wanted to ask you about a working agreement. This was a new concept to me that I came across in one of your recent posts, and I was wondering if you could talk about that. What is a working agreement?
A working agreement is a set of bullets that the team agrees upon, and the bullets describe what behaviors do we want to see in each other. It becomes kind of our code of conduct. So it's a summary of when we collaborate, when we communicate, both face to face, but sometimes there's a lot of communication going on through comments in tools and Jira or Slack or email and whatnot. So when we communicate and when we collaborate, how do we want to treat each other? What's important for us? And in the blog post you refer to, I present a workshop guide for how you can do it. There's tons of different ways. That's just my way. And by the end of this 1.5, 2 hours session, you typically have a bullet list of 10, 15, 20 bullets that describe things you value. And it could be simple things like if you're late, if you know you're going to be late to a meeting, let the team know. But it could also be more profound values, such as don't silently disagree, speak your mind. Or don't use sarcasm when you comment on other people's code because it's so easily misinterpreted. It could be things like we give each other feedback often and frequently, and we love it. So it can be on all levels. Whatever the team feel is important to bring up. And the value of actually doing this explicitly is that each and every bullet, you don't add a bullet to this working agreement unless everyone likes it to be there. So you have a voting with your thumbs, and unless all thumbs are up, it doesn't go in there. Then it's left out for a discussion later. So by the end of this workshop, you know that all these 15 bullets that are on our working agreement, we did all commit to those bullets. And that allows me to hold my friends accountable for their behaviors.
Right, and that's because voting thumbs up doesn't just mean like I think this is a good idea. It means like I can actually satisfy the condition.
Yes, I believe I'm capable of honoring this. And that's a true power, because once you've got that written down, then you can start giving proper feedback, hold each other accountable for their actions and behaviors, and you have something to improve from. So now you have the foundation, and next time you have a retrospective or a team meeting, you can discuss how can we improve our working agreement further. So no, I think it's a super powerful tool that all people that want to work really good with their team should take time to draft and design.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that great explanation. And again, I'll make sure to link to the post and the transcription. Moving on, I'd like to talk about your visualization examples book. And so, what I really enjoyed reading it. One thing it made me realize was how little information was ever on display in any of the sort of conventional workplaces I've worked in. And I mean, I've come across, and in some work I've done on other projects outside of LeanPub, the idea of things like Kanban and visualization. So there's all kinds of ways of visualizing work. For those listening, one way, and I'll just quote from the book, is you can quote, use boxes, lines, rows, and columns to describe your workflow and which state work transitions between, end quote. So you can imagine, you can have people can, in an office, there might be a wall dedicated to visualizing the work that people are doing. And the standard thing, not the standard thing, but one very sophisticated approach is to have, it sounds like it's not very sophisticated, but it is to use Post-it notes. And I learned from your book, Post-it notes. Don't use the cheap knockoffs. But you can have, and the Post-it notes can be different colors, which can represent different kinds of things. I've interviewed Alberto Brandolini about this, I believe was another LeanPub author. And then you can have various columns that things move. You can imagine things moving from left to right, from sort of, proposed to completed. And then you can do all sorts of interesting things, and we'll talk about a number of those different things that you talk about in your book that can get creative. But the sort of fundamental idea is that there's more to visualization than, as it were, just this. And you have this great line where you talk about how in front of these walls, you might want to think about, say, using tape or something to make a little box for people to stand in. And you say, I found that for some strange reason, people like to stand inside boxes. And it's funny because this is actually the tip of an iceberg of how you can sort of visualize your work. You can use visible, tangible things in your workplace to transform it. Including lava lamps, for example. It's just such a charming idea that you can have, like, say, a green lava lamp and a red lava lamp, and they can actually be connected to your product. And so that if like red can indicate, the website's down or something like that. And you can actually see this light change. So I just wanted to ask you about a few of these ideas that you set out in your book, one of which is dotting. Can you talk a little bit about what dotting is?
Dotting. Oh, yeah, that's a really simple thing. So, imagine you have Post-its moving through columns, just like you described. So they moved from proposed to planned to doing, review, and done, maybe. And if you're working in an Agile team, what you typically do is you meet in front of these visualization boards of your work every single morning at 9 o'clock or something. And you talk about what work do we need to push forward today? What should we collaborate on? Dotting is the technique of at the end of every daily meeting, you take a Sharpie or a whiteboard marker and you put a dot on each post-it that is in the doing column. So if a post-it accumulates 2, 3, 5 dots, then you should be suspicious. Is actually someone working on this one? Is someone stuck? Do they need help? Is it blocked? Are we waiting for something? So this simple act of dotting helps the team become aware of the progress of work. If we're stuck or not, do we need to act? And another brilliant thing is that, I don't know why, I've introduced this so many times, and I've never ever said that a dot is a bad thing. But for some reason, people hate it when their post-its are being dotted. They don't want it. But no, I didn't do anything today. Please don't dot it. I'm not counting your work. I'm counting days in progress. So just calendar days. There's no value. I don't put a value in the dot itself. But what people tend to do is they try to finish what they started. So I always prefer that. Don't start new things. Finish what you started first. That's one thing. And they also tend to break work down into smaller pieces. And when you do that, you tend to find simpler solutions, and it's easier to see progress and get a sense of a forecast and so on. So that simple thing drives so many great behaviors.
It's really interesting, yeah, because the one of the things you can visualize is, not just the tasks that are being done, but who's working on them as well. And one thing you talk about is, having little avatars. So you might have a little disc with your face on it, or, a cartoon character that you like in your name. And then anybody, it's just so interesting because when you think about walking to a normal office, it's like, who's doing what? I don't know. All I know is that they're sitting in front of a computer probably.
Yes.
But with these boards, you can see, with avatars on them, you can see what the person is working on, where they're jammed up, what they've completed recently.
And that is the true power of visualization, I think. It creates a shared reality. In most offices, as you mentioned, there are no whiteboards. There is no way of telling what's going on, who's working on what's the progress, what's important now, and so on. You actually need to go around and ask people. But if you manage to figure out the visualization and with columns and rows and whatnot, with post-its, that's useful, then the team working on that, or the project working on that, with that becomes their reality. So when they need to discuss options or decisions or make plans, short-term or mid-term plans, they meet in front of that whiteboard, because that is their shared reality. And it becomes tangible and not something abstract. And I think that's the true power.
Yeah.
And also, when designing this visualization, they have to agree upon the process itself. Because that's a weird thing when you visit a workplace and you ask someone, well, how does this process works? And then you ask someone else, you're going to get a different answer. For every single person you talk to, they're going to perceive the process or rules differently. But when you actually put them together and ask them, please visualize together how the process looks like, they're going to learn that they have different opinions about what's real and how it should be or shouldn't be, and they're forced to agree upon a collaborative way of working. So it reveals the discrepancies in people's different belief of how it is.
And one of the really interesting things is that you can there's sort of like there's just so much that can be visualized in a workspace that conventionally is not. For example, what kind of work a person is doing. So normally if you walk into a room and say an open plan office, and you see a bunch of people in front of their computers, but one person might be on Facebook, someone else might be really deep in really deep work. And one way you have of visualizing this is called a flow glass.
Oh yeah. Quite often I encounter teams that says, or people, engineers, typically developers, that says, sometimes I don't want to be disturbed. So how about in our team, we have a rule. If I'm wearing my headphones, you're not allowed to disturb me. But how would I know if you're just chilling with music or if it's intentional, right? Other teams have, if I have my Star Wars puppet on my monitor, then you're not allowed to disturb me. But how can I know if you actually put it there intentionally or if it's been around there for 3 days and you just forgot about it? But if you have an hourglass, a physical hourglass, and the sand is running inside it, then I know that you intentionally declare that I need to focus. I don't want to be disturbed. You flip the hourglass, and if I try to approach you and see that the sand is halfway through, then I can maybe make a decision to take a step back and come back after 30 minutes. So it's a super simple way of signaling to others that please don't disturb me right now because I want to focus.
The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is a lot of the things that you write about in your book struck me as ways to make the workplace a place that's happy and celebratory. And one of the things you talk about is release credits.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's a good example. So release credits. So one team I worked with, we started having the habit of every second week when the iteration, the sprint closed down, we took 5-10 minutes and we just chaotically wrote on Post-its things we were proud of from the last 2 weeks. And we had different colors. So one color meant we shipped something to our users. Another color indicated something internally within our team. Yeah, so they have different. The colors had meaning, and then the bigger the Post-it, the more proud we felt about it. So a tiny Post-it was, yeah, this happened. A huge Post-it, A5 size maybe, meant this is super brilliant. So it was one simple and great technique to celebrate your own achievements and build a sense of pride. But there's so many more things you can do to do this, because usually you're so focused on work and the next problem that you rarely take time to celebrate the hard work you're pouring into it. So this is a way to create a sense of pride, but also communicating to others what we are doing and what we have achieved.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the idea is, from movies, at the end, when you finish a movie, most people leave, but there are these credits, unless it's a Marvel movie and you're going to get some kind of Easter egg or something like that. But But at the end of movies, you celebrate the work that people have done, and you say their name and what they did. And when a project is completed in an office, what's to prevent you from putting something up, celebrating what you've done?
I've seen a few teams that have the luxury of having a really great designer with Photoshop magician skills, and he or she created a movie poster after each sprint. And so it was a kind of a characterized movie poster with the title being related to the work or whatever. So it's only internal jokes, but still, that's another way of creating pride and celebrating. But I want to add that you're kind of referring to these ideas as my ideas. They're not. I've been collecting visualization ideas for many, many years. So I think 80% of the stuff I write about in my book is things I've seen somewhere, someplace. And I thought they just was worthy of being shared outside that place.
Okay, I'll try and make sure to qualify my representation of them, so I don't attribute other people's inventions to you. I guess I'm just sort of naively, I learned about them from your book, so they must have been by you. And there's this great physicality to the examples that you describe. One of which is the concept cubes.
Yeah, sometimes you want to convey information. So you've agreed upon something, or you want to convey information, or you want to teach something. One way is, of course, to create a PowerPoint or write an email, or you create something tangible that you can pick up from the table. So a concept cube. So imagine a big dice. 1 decimeter cubed, 10 centimeters cubed, and you write your stuff on the sides of that dice. And it could be, you could have the working agreement, you can have the definition of done, you can have good programming practices or whatnot. And the beautiful thing about this is that it's a physical thing that lays around in your office, in your team room, and it just begs to be picked up and read. So yeah, I've used it a few times to great success. I love it. I haven't seen it much, but those times I've seen it, it's been really fun. People play with it, read it, pick it up.
Yeah, and
and create their own.
And speaking of dice, you actually talk about dice. You've got examples of people using dice in the workplace for example, activity dice. So, if during a daily stand-up, and a stand-up is this idea of a meeting where no one's sitting down, to try and make it briefer than it might be otherwise. But one thing you can do is you can have, let's say, a set of 6 different things that you would typically do, during daily stand-up, but you would only do them once. This might be the theme of of each particular stand-up, and so you roll dice to decide what to do that day, and it introduces this joyful kind of slight randomness to what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's another use of a dice where you say every Wednesday you roll it, and the dice will tell you a joint activity. So clean up your area, or have a joint lunch, or go for a jog together, or something. And then in New Zealand, I discovered yet another way to use a die. So that team happened to be 6 people. So they rolled the die, and the die presented a name, and that person with that name became today's awesome person, and he or she got a hug and an applaud. Nothing more, just silly and fun.
Yeah, there's just so many great examples. Another one is, I don't know why this was my favorite one, probably because it's just so right, but you're right. Dropping balls in tubes is a fun way to visualize data. Yeah. Of course, as Susan read, of course it is. And so one thing you can do is you can have people kind of vote on things or express some information about something by setting up these different tubes with different labels of them, and then again giving people like no balls to drop in a version of the dotting to some extent.
Yeah, it could be anything, right? So instead of sending out a survey or asking people to tally vote on Post-its, you can have plastic tubes which you pour in plastic balls or ping pong balls in.
Yeah, it's just so fun, and it's I wanted to, like, before we got to the fun, I wanted to do the heavy lifting to make it clear that this is all about community. It's a lot of it is about mood. And making the workplace an enjoyable place to be, where you're empowered and all that. But another very serious layer of it is about communicating.
Yes.
And that in these empowered in an empowered agile workplace, communication is like you make it fun through these kinds of examples, but it's the price you're paying for that empowerment and autonomy.
I would like to add one aspect. Many of the examples I provide in the book also helps to shape new habits. So as a team, you might decide that let's keep the daily stand-up shorter, or let's pair up and collaborate more often, or you're trying to create a new habit. So having a visualization for that can help you make that habit stick. So in one sense, visualizations can be a great driver for improvement as well.
Moving on to the last part of the interview, where we talk about your work as a creator. So you do seminars and videos and things like that, but you also do books.
Yes.
And I was wondering, I've got a few questions. My first question is, what attracted you to use Leanpub as the platform for your books?
I got it recommended, but I can't recollect from whom. Many years ago, and found a few books, and then when I eventually got the energy and the idea to write this one, the visualization examples, it was obvious for me. This is the platform, because I love the platform, the reach, the ease of reaching out and for people to download them and even buy. So I love the whole ecosystem you've created. But so that's how I found it.
Okay. And you had a really interesting process. So you had, for creating this book, so it was the visualization examples book was on Google Drive.
Yes. Yes. Initially, when I first got the inspiration, I just opened Microsoft Word, and I started typing, and I just wanted to try out a few pages and how it felt like, and then I sent it out to my colleagues, asking for feedback, and I practically got none. And one of them said, well, it's impossible to give you feedback on a PDF. This is crap. I have tons of feedback, but unless you convert it into a format where it's easy for me to give you feedback, I won't give it to you. So what do you want? Well, for example, Google Drive. It's easy to mark a text and add a comment. I didn't like that, because that meant I had to redo work. So I kept on writing, and then I was up to 20 pages. But then I actually started to rethink. Because I'm an Agile coach. I preach iterative development. I preach fast feedback. I preach have close dialogue with your customers and users. So, okay, fine. I'll move to Google Docs, and I did. So I copied the things I've done so far, and I used Google Slides, which is Google's version of PowerPoint, which allowed me to do more visual design as well. So I wrote a book there, and then pretty quickly after that, I even wrote a blog post about me writing the book, and invited everyone who wanted to be part of me writing that book to access the document. So I wrote the book publicly online, which was a scary thing. Mm-hmm. So if you were lucky, you would actually see me typing, correcting, erasing, adding paragraphs, and so on, live. And people were, and they, I think at one point I had, 500 people asked for access to it, until maybe more, 700-800 people, of which a sliver, maybe 10% actually helped me out with fixing the grammar, improving spelling, making chapters more clear, pointing out confusions or what's going on here, I don't get it, can you write this in a simpler way? And they even proposed some examples, which I later on added. So from being something scary, meaning I publish my work as I'm creating it, right? Usually I imagine authors want to get it perfect, polish it before they present it to the world for judgment. Because feedback is a scary thing. So that was scary in the beginning, but then it became a life of its own. So it almost became a community where the contributors or the people commenting, they started having chats about whatnot. So the discussions derailed into other things. So it was brilliant. And it also gave me a push to move on. So I already had a fan club that helped me and encouraged me to move on. So I loved it, and I'm actually writing a new book the same manner. Right now, it's been on hold for 6 months, but I will continue after summer, I think.
That's a really great story. Thank you for sharing that. The experience that you're describing is kind of one of the reasons LeanPub exists. But I think yours is the first story I've heard of someone who may have been sort of where they were writing and people could have seen it live.
Yes.
if they sort of happened to be there at the right time. But one thing that many people who we've talked to over the years have discovered is that the right reader wants to help you.
Yes.
They want to help you. They feel good about it. It's not like they don't feel like you're taking work from them or something like that. They want to contribute. They want to help improve it. It might sound kind of trivial, but there's kind of as a reader of something, there's nothing more, I don't know, not exactly exciting, but it's very fulfilling to find a typo and tell the author and have them correct it. Almost in real time.
I experienced that too. So some of the people helping out, they were really passionate, and they were several times a week. They checked in to see if I've written something new, and they helped me improve it. And of course, I've added acknowledgements to those who contributed the most in the book as well. So it was really fun to give it back. So I love that process, even though it was scary in the beginning. And I made a couple of decisions. One was not to go with a publisher, because I just wanted to get it written and out there. If you go with a publisher, you're going to get their feedback, which you have to act on. They're going to take on, in some cases, they take over the creative control you want to have, and so on. So I just wanted this to be good enough to be released. So that was one thing. And then I didn't want it to be perfect. I wanted to feel playful and fun. But the one thing that's really scared me in the beginning, if I'm actually writing my book online, will anyone bother to buy it once it's completed? Because if people have access to the next page I'm writing all the time, what's the point of buying the full book? They've already read it. But that turned out to be wrong. So those who were involved and saw the progress, they were my promoters. They were the ones who told their friends. And
It's really interesting. One version of that experience that we've seen over and over again is people might make their minimum price. So Leanpub books can have two prices set for them, a minimum and a suggested price. You can set the minimum price to $0, but then you can have a suggested price of $10 or whatever. And one thing we've seen over and over again is people who get a book like that for free, and then they're like, "Hey, I want to pay for it now. Now that I've read it, I want to pay for it."
But you don't have that feature.
We don't have that feature yet, but what we do is we have a workaround, which is just buy a new copy and then archive one. You can archive one of the two copies that you have, and then in your library, so you don't see two. So it's a bit of a workaround. Eventually, we will have that. But yeah, it's the inversion of an old prejudice that we have about the marketplace and money. That if someone can get something for free, then they'll never pay for it, and it's just not true.
No. So one thing that surprised me is that some people decide to pay even more for the Leanpub version than the physical copy. I actually sell a physical copy of the book on Amazon as well. But some people choose to pay more for the digital PDF version, which I can't hold it in my hands. But I guess it's their way of showing appreciation.
It's funny. Just this to me. I love physical books as much as the next guy with a doctorate in English literature. But in many ways, an ebook is far more valuable than if you could say to someone, this book will take up no space and you can read it anywhere at any time. That sounds like a magic book. And one you might, I guess you can probably get a sense of what I'm sort of clumsily getting at, which is if you describe imagine you have a book you can search. Who wouldn't pay for that,
Yeah. I agree.
But anyway, but of course we all know that it costs nothing to produce a digital copy of something, which is why we don't see it as being worth as much. But so this is where we get very much into the weeds. So you've used our bring your own book feature, which is what we built to honor the fact that every author has their own process and they might not all want to use the processes that we provide. And so how do you produce your PDFs?
This is super simple. This is embarrassing. So I write the first version on Google Slides online. So that's not the best layout tool. So once I've done, I copy paste the text into a slightly better tool, Microsoft PowerPoint, because I'm a PowerPoint magician through all my seminars and trainings. So I do my layout of the book in PowerPoint. And then in PowerPoint, there is a function that says print to PDF. So that's how I create my PDF.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's embarrassing at all. That's any process that you have that works for you is the right one. And everyone has their own things tools that they're good at and that they enjoy using.
Yeah.
And so some people just want to write in Google Docs. Some people we've had authors use PowerPoint to produce books before. One of our best-selling books has 1 million words in it, and it was made in Microsoft Word, and the author, hints export as PDF, and so that's how he produces his
whatever works.
Yeah.
But when I explain that I'm using PowerPoint for the design and layout, or graphical designers or people who work with print, they get very upset. But I like it. It's simple and nice and playful.
Yeah. And actually, so one thing I wanted to ask you about is your book has been translated into 5 or 6 different languages already.
Maybe even more.
How did that come about? Did people approach you, or did you approach other people?
No, people reached out to me. So they found me on LinkedIn or found out my email. So people reached out, and I have the same deal with everyone. That seems to be good enough because I have more translations on the way. So I just tell them that, yes, thank you for reaching out. I would love your help to translate this book to your language. And we simply split the Leanpub profit 50-50. The only request I have is that once you've completed your translation, you send it out to 4 reviewers. Not friends, but colleagues in your business, in your country, and you act on the feedback. Acting means disregarding or correcting, but you need to consciously go through the feedback. And once you feel you've done that, then we publish it on LeanPub.
And my last question about your books is, so they're full of illustrations, and these illustrations have words in them. So did you have to redraw illustrations to accommodate different languages?
Yeah, I've done that twice. I'm not going to do that again.
Okay.
And when writing my new book, it has also a lot of illustrations, but I've learned the hard way that don't draw text, add text afterwards in PowerPoint, so it's easier to translate. So no, I've redrawn the text twice, and it was just too much work. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah, I sort of double checked to see if you'd done it, and I think it may have been a Spanish translation, and I was like, wow, if that's what happened, that must have been a ton of work.
And I don't even know Spanish.
Right.
So
right. Yeah.
It took forever.
Yeah, I bet. So the last question I always like to ask people on this podcast is, if there was one thing we could build for you, or one thing we could fix for you, is there anything you can think of that you would ask us to do?
Yeah, but this is a big one. I would love the thing I achieved with writing in Google Slides, meaning that people can simply access. They can request access to the document, and they can see me writing it, and they can add comments to pictures or text. But this is not a simple fix, right? This is a huge ask. But I would love to be able to do what I did on the LeanPub platform, because it was so much fun, and I think it tripled the quality of my book. And if that could be integrated into the tool set and platform, I would love that. But that's not a simple thing. I do realize that.
No, that's great to hear that. I mean, helping publishing books in progress and getting feedback early on is one of the reasons we exist, and sort of facilitating that kind of collaboration is part of our big vision. As you say, it's hugely complex to do. One way we've accommodated that is that actually, I don't know if you know this, but we have a Google Docs writing mode now. It's our most recent writing mode. So what you can do is you can create a book in Google Drive in a folder in Google. Well, what you do is you create a book on LeanPub, and then we automatically set up a folder in your Google Drive with some template Google Docs in it, and then you can actually write your LeanPub book in Google using Google Docs in this folder in Google Drive, and then just click to preview and publish right from there. And so that way with Google Docs, and so this is not Google Slides, but we actually already enable you to use Google Docs to do this, so you can get all the benefits of the collaboration you're describing and still be hooked into LeanPub and generate PDF, EPUB, and Mobi and all that kind of stuff.
I didn't know. That's brilliant.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. I mean, we're still like sort of, people are still kicking the tires, that kind of thing. But we've had a couple of books made from it, and this idea of having the book kind of live for people to comment on and see changes in is something that we're really excited to see. And also, it's tooting our own horn, but like it's pretty magical if you know how to use Google Drive and Google Docs. The idea that you can produce your book on and have it for sale, like an updated version in a bookstore by clicking a button, using a Google Docs add-on, is like pretty amazing. So we're really excited to see where that goes. Well, thank you very much for that feedback. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening to talk to me and to everyone listening on this podcast. And thank you for using LeanPub and being a LeanPub author.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. And thanks, as always, to all of you for listening to this episode of the Front Matter podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate and review it wherever you found it. And if you'd like to be a LeanPub author yourself, please visit our website at leanpub.com. Thanks.